I want to talk a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I heard from my Republican colleagues and then talk on the bill in chief as well. And I would begin by asking them to spare me the hypocrisy. 8 years, the Senate Republicans had the majority in this chamber while this governor was in his seat. 8 years I sat on that side of the chamber and watched as they didn't raise a finger to object to this governor. Starting with redistricting almost 10 years ago, because they believed they had a deal. They believed the governor was on their side. They believed the governor wanted a Republican Senate. So for 8 years, not a subpoena issued, not a crossword said. It was all hunky-dory when they were the ones cutting the deals. In one term, our majority has done more to push back against this governor than the Republicans did in 8 years in the majority. So now the theatrics are in effect. Now we're going to bang the table and yell about dictatorships and whatnot. And we are actually taking real steps to curtail the emergency powers that were granted with almost unanimous support in this chamber. I think there were 4 no votes. And so what have they done since that time? Since they almost all agreed that these emergency powers should exist, what have they done to try and roll back any of them? They've done hostile amendments every day, which, by the way, have no consequence even if they were to pass. All that does is take the bill that's on the floor off the floor. But, importantly, the legislature was granted a power to repeal particular orders without the governor's sign-off. Senate agrees, Assembly agrees, a particular directive would go away. So, how many times did our Republican friends introduce concurrent resolutions to attempt to roll back one of the governor's directives? Mr. President, the answer is 0. 0 in a year. Now, it's not that they don't know how to introduce resolutions, because they've done plenty of those, and I want to get this right, so I have my notes with me. Republicans since 2020 have introduced 74 concurrent resolutions for consideration. They cover a lot of broad topics. Some of them include the time a governor would have to appoint a department head, whether or not the governor should be required to have the State of the State in the Assembly chamber as opposed to the Empire State Plaza where he's been having them in recent years, whether a bill can be introduced between midnight and 8 a.m. There's one that wants to increase the length of legislative terms from 2 to 4 years. One to require biennial budgeting, one to convey forest preserve land. This one's interesting because it may actually have application. Whether a governor can appoint a lieutenant governor to serve in the case of a vacancy in that office. And then some of my favorites, which I believe were introduced by the minority leader of the Senate himself. I'm not sure if it was last year, so maybe he wasn't at the time. But one which would implement a clearly unconstitutional system of electing governors by county in this state. And my personal favorite, dividing the state into 3 semi-autonomous regions with separate governors. So there's all sorts of cockamamie ideas that they figured out how to put into the text of a resolution. What have they not done in the last year? Introduce a single resolution to repeal any of the governor's directives. So again, spare me the theatrics today. If you wanted to legislate, put in a bill and try and get it done. Or put in a resolution and try and get it done, I should say. Instead, they do things that they hope get attention, but would have no practical consequence, even if they succeeded. Now let me talk a little bit about what we're trying to do with this legislation. There are bills that we pass and consider all the time that set broad parameters and then delegate to agencies how to administer them. That is a very common way of legislating. So here's a way of looking at what's happening today. A year ago, the governor was granted powers to issue directives. Today, we're taking that away from him. The question is, what happens to all of the directives that were issued in the interim? The 60 directives, I believe it's 90 executive orders, but 60 directives contained within them, roughly. We know what they are. We talked about some of them today. They're public. We are essentially voting to say these directives will continue in effect and be administered by the executive, as we do on so many other issues. In fact, these have to be renewed every 30 days, and we can reject them and repeal them without the governor's involvement. So I hear about the importance of democracy from a group of people that votes against every single bill to make it easier for people to vote in this chamber. And I worry about what would happen if we did go to a scenario where the state did not have the ability during the coronavirus pandemic to issue important orders about mask mandates or arena capacity or the implementation of vaccines and who's allowed to give them, and so many others. If those were to all go away today, I dare say there would be some counties in this state that would follow the path of Texas and Florida. We even heard Senator Borrell reference Florida specifically as a model in his mind, where you could be in a COVID-denying county. Everybody want to go sit 200 people at a bar? Go for it. Without regard to what would happen when those people went home or back to their counties of origin themselves and spread a very deadly virus that hopefully is on the path to being defeated. With due respect, that is nuts. That we would just say we want to eliminate mask mandates, we want to eliminate arena restrictions, we want to eliminate rules about how the vaccine is being given and who can give it. That's not just nuts, it's dangerous. And would put people's public health in great, great danger. I'm proud I don't live in Texas, and I'm proud I don't live in Florida. Because in New York, this legislature values people's health and what we need to do to protect it. This bill repeals the governor's ability to issue new directives. It implements new standards for renewing ones that are currently in effect. And for the first time, it gives the legislature the ability to repeal the entire state of emergency without the governor say so. It is a good bill, it's an important bill, and I encourage all my colleagues to vote for it. Thank you, Mr. President.